Hello, welcome to the tutorial on how to mix primary colours using watercolour and the wet on wet technique. I'm going to talk you through this technique. I've put some music on in the background, so there might be some periods where I'm not talking, so you might want to listen to the music. I'm going to approach this as a mindful relaxation exercise. So before I've started, I've stretched my watercolour paper. There is a separate tutorial on how to do that if you want to have a look at it. I've selected some of my favourite brushes that I'm going to use. I've got a pencil, mixing palette, a range of brushes, some water and a sponge for wetting out, and the paints. So I'm just going to be using the main primary colours. I've got cadmium yellow, ultramarine and cadmium red. So I'm going to put a bit of these into each of the palettes. While I'm doing that, I'll explain what I'm going to do. So we're going to wet down the paper. And the idea of wet on wet is to apply very wet runny paint onto wet paper. The reason this is a perfect technique for mindfulness is that it's lovely just to watch the paint run and flow and spread. And for this technique, the reason I'm using this technique for the colour mixing is that I want it to be an observation in looking at how the colours mix. So we're going to be watching it and observing it, and I'll do some close-up videos to link in with this technique so that you can really observe the colours mixing. So before you start, it would be a good idea to think about how you want your coloured rainbow to look. In the example on the Moodle site, I used a landscape approach and just did lines. And I did like the way this turned out because it almost looked like a landscape picture, very abstract but a bit of a landscape picture. You could go with the rainbow, traditional rainbow shape if you wanted to. For this one I'm going to use a diagonal composition. So I'm just sketching out the middle very, very lightly because I don't want the pencil line to show. If you're unsure, it's a good idea always to sketch out first. So I'm going to start working with yellow in the middle, and then we're going to work our way up, and then we're going to work our way down. So yellow is the middle point to focus on. So I'm getting the sponge very wet and wetting out the paper. I'm going to start off with my fan brush. It's my favourite brush at the moment. You can use any brush, but try and make it a soft, quite large brush for this technique. You're going to get better results. Then lots of water on the yellow. Oh, there's already a bit dropped on. That's absolutely fine. And then I'm going to work my way, applying the colour to the paper. I'm going to fill the whole page with my rainbow picture. So I'm going to make the yellow band fill a third of the page. I'm going to be adding the next colour directly on top, so I want them to mix together. I'm going to wash the brush Then I'm going to add some red. Doesn't matter at this stage that there's a bit of yellow on the brush and in the water, because we're going to be mixing them anyway. Just going to observe here what happens when the yellow mixes with the red. Just going to take a bit more water, and then I'm going to help this along just by gently brushing into the colour to mix it on the paper. You can do shapes here, different brush strokes, working into the orange. I've changed the water for some clean water now, so we're going to work with the blue. Get the blue nice and wet. To check that the paper's wet, you might just need to add a bit more water in with the sponge. And let that yellow leak out a little bit more. And then I'm going to work in with the blue. I'm going to try a different size brush. Just mix in. I don't want the blue here to mix in with the orange, I just want it to mix in with the yellow to get a lovely green colour. Just going to add in a little bit more blue here, so the edge of the green has a nice blue line to it, clear blue. I'm going to work that blue down to the edge of the page. I'm going to continue working with the blue to make a third secondary colour. And again, wet the paper down a little bit at the top. have a rainbow painting. The thing I love about this technique is I never know quite what I'm going to get when I've done this, but I've done this technique over and over many times, and each time something quite random happens, which I do love. So I've been watching it settle. I've just decided to just work into the red a little bit because it has pulled a bit. So I'm just going to work that just to soften it. Reviewing my painting the next day. As the picture was drying, I realised there was some pooling that had occurred as the paper had not been stretched properly. So I used a sponge and dabbed into these areas to do some blotting. I also added a little bit more blue to just make the green a little bit more vibrant. So as I've said, you never really know what you're going to get with these pictures. But I do think as an exercise in observing colour, it's worked rather well. The purple in this one's quite subtle and the orange is quite dominant. This is a painting I'd done previously. As I said, this one has a different composition with more of a horizontal landscape composition. The purple's very dominant at the bottom and the red takes up half the space. This one has some bleeding where the red bleeds in to the orange into the yellow. And I do think the blue at the top looks a bit like a sky. So choose whichever composition you would like. Here's some examples that were done by learners in class a while ago. As you can see, everybody's chosen their own different composition. Some have gone for rainbow, vertical or diagonal stripes. So I hope you decide whichever technique you like, whichever way to approach this, and have fun with it is the most important thing.